Hey guys, welcome back to more Entitled People stories. In this video, a ridiculous Karen attacks a police officer at a traffic stop and pulls out her gun and then shoots. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. Ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to be a police officer. I'm sure that most of you out there reading this have probably thought the same thing when you were a kid. It's a common aspiration among the young, but very few actually go on to fulfill that aspiration, either falling into a different line of work or the appeal just wore off. Some may even live in parts of the world where policing is extremely dangerous, like Brazil for example, where I am from. And being a police officer is more like joining the military. Being an officer of the law is not so bad anymore in Brazil, but it can still get pretty hairy at times, more so than if you were an officer in somewhere like New York or California. Half the time it's not even the criminals we have to be on the lookout for, but the everyday citizen who still thinks the police are just government-run gangs and corruption runs wild. I've always wanted to be a police officer because of my desire to uphold justice, catch criminals and make my home safe for everyone, tourists included. I can be a bit of an adrenaline junkie at times too, and nothing gets the blood pumping like raiding a drug den or running down a pickpocket. Though I've never actually raided a drug den, the training simulations can get pretty intense and I've chased down more than my fair share of pickpockets, con artists and thieves. That all being said, the only time I've ever felt like my life was actually in danger was not while in the middle of some shootout with gangs or even tussling with some kingpin. The only time I've actually felt endangered was when I was confronted by an average citizen on my way home from a late shift. I had not been an officer of the law for very long. I think it was around 5 years or so since I had graduated from training, so I was still pretty much considered a rookie among the more experienced people, though I was far from green. I had actually been promoted from what we call Sarveya Cadela to Mula de Papelada, which might sound fancy, but it literally means one who makes the tea and the one who does all the paperwork. So on the day in question, I was pretty run down. It was a Friday, I remember that much because that was when the chief wanted all loose ends tied up and files put away properly, which was my responsibility. So it was a day of grueling, tiring and highly dangerous filing and sorting. Paper cuts are no joke. I was so drained from the tedious work that I did not even bother getting changed out of my uniform and just stuck a jacket over the top. Obviously, I put all my equipment away, the tactical vest and the like, so I was just wearing the clothing and carried a set of cuffs with me, like all officers do. We also carry pepper spray or mace, though we are not required to do so. It's safer that we do. You never know when some criminal elements might take their arrest personally and wish to make amends. There's a guy in my precinct who got caught once and has a rather nasty scar on his arm from where he almost got stabbed. On the drive home, I did not realize that I was being followed. I don't know for how long they had been following me, but the first instance I knew that someone was following me was when the car swerved around me at a stoplight and pulled up in front of me. I nearly shat myself. I thought I was about to get gunned down or something by the cartel or the mafia. I watched far too many movies, by the way. I reached for my sidearm, but obviously it was in the armory and all I had to defend myself was the pepper spray, which I was not going to do much against 4 or 5 guys armed with AKs. I remember thinking about my wife and how I would never see her again. I thought about how she was gonna react when she gets the news, my mom and dad, my brothers and sisters. I thought about how I wished I had done more and how I would never get the chance to do so much. My mind must have misfired when I saw who got out of the car alone. I honestly did not know what to think. At first I thought she must be senile and didn't know where she was, and then as she came towards me I thought that maybe she had lost control of the car and needed help, but before I could get out of the car to see if she needed help, she pulls out a gun and waves it at me. "Don't move!" she keeps screaming at me. I have no idea who this woman was. I had not arrested any woman that looked to be in their 60s. If she had been in their mid-20s or 30s, I might understand what was going on. Like I said, some criminals take their arrests personally, but I had not arrested any old woman before. "I know who you are," she kept shouting at me as she came around to the driver's side door. "Get out, I'm making a citizen's arrest." I must have misheard her. She was making a citizen's arrest? Against a police officer? I open the door and go to step out, hands held high, desperately praying that she knows how to handle a firearm and it doesn't accidentally go off in my face. "Look ma'am, I'm a police officer," I tell her. I give her my badge, number and everything. "No, you're not! You're that criminal! I recognize you from the wanted posters. Now get your hands up and get out of the car." I try to reason with her, show her that I'm wearing an officer's uniform, but she just keeps shouting in hysterics, claiming that criminals are dressing as the police now. There was literally no reasoning with this woman. The best I can do is to let the situation play out, keep her calm, and avoid doing anything rash. Let her make her arrest, and when the officers come, they can clear everything up. You know, all the training in the world cannot prepare you for your first time being held at gunpoint. Classroom lessons are filled with psychological tactics you can pull out to keep a crazed gunman passive, but when you are in that situation for real, it's another story. I barely even remember taking lessons, let alone the content of what was taught. I was relying entirely on instinct and a desire not to die. "I'm just gonna reach in my pocket and show you my badge, okay?" I tell her in the most calm voice I could muster. Now, the thing about movies and guns is that they make it seem like a single shot can kill a man, but it's actually very difficult. To kill someone with a sidearm, unless you hit the heart, you can even survive a shot to the head potentially, but all that information flies out the window when you hear the crack of a gunshot. Fortunately, the woman missed me but hit the window of the driver's side door, which stood between me and Karen. Glass actually shattered and sliced me up pretty good, but with the adrenaline, I felt none of it and acted purely on my instinct. I pulled out the pepper spray and went to town on Karen's face, managed to get around the door and disarm her before she could let off another shot and accidentally kill an innocent bystander or me. When the backup arrived, I was a shaky mess. I had several cuts from the shattered glass and must have looked pretty gruesome to the paramedics when they came. Karen got carted away, and later, while I was sorting some things out, I found out that she had prior convictions, notably one that forbade her from carrying firearms, and in the end she got several years in prison for illegally carrying, 2 years for assaulting a police officer, and 6 months for dangerous driving. At the end of it all, there was a little part of me that felt guilty for locking her away for so long. I just had to keep reminding myself that she could have seriously hurt someone had the circumstances been a little different. She might have even gotten herself killed if she actually confronted the person she thought I was. But well, she is safe, and so is everyone else. And yeah, ripe stars, indeed, everyone is safe now. Let's hope that Karen doesn't get out of prison anytime earlier. In my opinion, she might as well stay there. The next one is a postal revenge story. And by the way, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like the video, post a comment, and if you haven't already, also subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily videos. So I work with a company that times races, running, cycling, triathlon, etc. The owner is a guy named John who works at Race Timing CO. Both made up names. At a race, some equipment was stolen. It is expensive equipment but extreme special. Maybe 200 people in the US use this kind of system. And the components cost about $1,000 each for a total of about $4,000. About a month later, the stolen equipment popped up on eBay. John reached out to the seller via eBay and asked that his stolen equipment be returned. The seller was a jerk, as might be expected from someone selling stolen equipment would be. He said, "There's no way you know it's your equipment." The thing is, photo number 3 showed one of the boxes with a printed label on it saying, "Race Timing Company, John owner, John's phone number." It literally had his name on it. So then, John escalated it to eBay to at least prevent his stolen equipment from being sold. eBay totally dropped the ball. They bought the seller's story that he had bought it at a mail auction for lost mail, which made no sense since the seller's info was in the same town where the equipment was stolen. The seller also tried to claim that John had no way of proving that it was his stolen equipment, except it has his name and phone number on it. Anyway, John had no evidence that the seller had not bought it at a mail auction and ruled against John. So John hatched a plan. He did what any rational person would do. He purchased his own stolen equipment back using an employee's name and asked that it be shipped USPS. He was right next to a post office, he said, and that is when the pro-revenge comes into play. So it's a felony to knowingly traffic stolen items, and John waited patiently as his equipment was marked shipped and ended up arriving at his coworker's house in another state for good measure. And John called the postal inspection service. He had the seller's full name, address, and proof that he knew it was stolen. He had police reports, pictures of his names on the equipment matching serial numbers, transcripts of him informing the seller that it was stolen, etc. Finally, the USPS inspectors knocked on the guy's door 2 days later and reportedly found numerous stolen items. He was charged with almost a dozen federal felonies, including felony theft, trafficking stolen goods across state lines, and lying to federal agents. And to top it off, John filed a stolen goods complaint with eBay since he now had tons of proof that he'd been sold stolen goods. So finally, he got his money back minus shipping. And the next one is a malicious compliance story. My in-laws used to live just outside of town. They moved this past fall to my mother-in-law's home island and we moved in their place. And when I say just outside, I mean about 2 meters outside of the city plan. To be exact and important for later, the city plan reached up to the middle of the dirt road that separated their property with the neighboring one. So back in spring of 2017, my in-laws received a letter from the city council about cleaning their property from dead grass in preparation for summer due to fire hazards or they would be fined. The letter and the deadline, end of May, were normal. However, what was not normal was the area named. It was their property, the property next to them, inside city limits, and the road in between. My father-in-law took the letter to the council and explained that the property next to him did not belong to him and could not clean it. They appeared to accept it, but something was nagging him. Now, my father-in-law had worked in exactly 2 companies in life, both of them handling big government contracts, and his main job was to take care of red tape and government bureaucracy. So he found the exact law that said that the owner was responsible for their property and the city was responsible for any roads and any properties inside city limits that an owner could not be found. He had also found through his connections that the local council was under investigation for misappropriation of funds, including the funds for cleaning lots that were considered fire hazards. The tactic they used was to include lots that fell under their responsibility to nearby owners and either intimidate with the fear of a fine to clean them or fine them and pocket the money. My father-in-law decided to become creative. First, he gathered all the plants related to his property and the one next to him. Next, he cleared his property. He was planning to do that anyway, but only that. He cleared the part of the road that fell outside city limits and then he waited. And well, the deadline passed and about 10 days later a hefty fine arrived. My father-in-law challenged officially, the council tried to enforce the fine and my father-in-law challenged it again, presenting his evidence on an open forum of the council. The council insisted they were on the right and if my father-in-law did not pay, they would take legal action. My father-in-law agreed happily to the legal action. This led to the court appointing an outside inspector to check the property, the city plans and the work my father-in-law had done. The council not only lost the case and had to pay legal fees, but were forced to an outside audit that led to a couple of councilmen facing criminal charges. Every year since then, my father-in-law used to clean his property and exactly up to the middle of the road next to him. That duty has been passed down to me now, which I fulfilled this year. And the next one is another revenge story. Once at a hotel, I put the "Don't Disturb" sign on my door before going to bed. At 7 AM, there was a loud knocking from the maid wanting to clean my room. I told her it was too early, but she told me I was checking out that day and the hotel was completely booked for the next 2 nights due to some sort of local event. I told her I was not ready to check out and I intended to sleep for another couple hours. So then the sign on the back of the door, and I pointed it out to her, said checkout time 11 AM. More knocking around 8 AM, waking me up, same maid telling me to hurry up since she needed to clean the room. I told her with a degree of annoyance that I was not checking out for another couple hours. The next time she knocked a few minutes later, I did not answer, loud banging, and then she unlocked the door, but the chain on the inside kept the door from opening and it let her know the room was still occupied. I immediately called the front desk and was told that checkout for that day had been changed to 9 AM and that I'd been informed of that when I checked in. Well, that was not true and I said so. Their reply was that if I was not out by 9 AM, I would be billed for an extra night. I called their bluff, saying that if that were the case, I'd simply stay the extra night since they were charging me for it. We came to an agreement that they would give me an extra hour and I would check out by 10 AM. I would have been out earlier, but the maid started banging on the door at 9 AM telling me to get out. She actually told me to get out. She was waiting at my door when I walked out at exactly 10 AM and she immediately rushed inside. I wheeled her cart outside my door to the elevator, rode down to the parking garage and pushed the cart about 10 feet away from the elevator against a wall. Then I went up and checked out and yes, I know, the maid was doing her job. But 7 AM is very early and after telling her I was not ready, she came back twice and woke me up. She was very rude when she could have asked me nicely or explained that earlier checkout time for that day. And yeah, ripe stars, I'm curious, what do you think about this story? Do you think OP was acting like an a-hole, or was it justified? Let me know what you think in the comments. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I used to live on the outskirts of a rundown city that had seen better days. It was a place where safety was a luxury, criminals and illegal gangs ran rampant, operating with little fear of consequences. Walking through the city meant constantly looking over your shoulder, never quite feeling at ease. It seemed like the authorities had turned a blind eye, or perhaps they were just too corrupt to care. My late mom hailed from a family that once thrived as wealthy farmers. But as the city and its government took a turn for the worse, so did their fortune. The decline in the city's condition mirrored the downfall of my family's once privileged status. The village, which had once bustled with life and prosperity, now stood as little more than a ghost town. Yet, despite the desolation, there was one constant that refused to change: the river. Though the families moved and the lands grew more barren than fertile, the river still provided us all with a way to boat around and catch fish, trading it with the nearby villages to keep the economy flowing. Around 8 years ago, a group of people made a rather audacious decision to settle in a secluded corner of our desolate village. They acquired a cottage that happened to be the largest one around, formerly owned by the corrupt mayor, who had hastily fled with his family after being caught in a scandalous weapon smuggling operation. In an unprecedented move, these newcomers established what they called, and what was entirely unfamiliar to us, a homeowners association. The idea of an HOA was as confusing as it was suspicious. In a place where lawlessness and corruption reigned, the idea of this unincorporated and uninsured group attempting to govern the community unsettled many of us. The city had long turned a blind eye to its own illegal activities, and no one cared enough to question their lack of oversight. But suddenly, this small group of about 7 individuals took it upon themselves to start wielding authority and demanding financial contributions to supposedly restore our village. Their actions, however, were nothing short of illegal. They had no official status or legal backing, and yet they insisted on having people sign documents and contribute funds under the pretense of community revitalization. While some initially fell prey to their manipulative tactics, others saw through the facade and recognized their true intentions. We quickly started ignoring whatever these clowns had to say about their vision for the city. As time went on, their deceitful practices became more apparent, mismanagement of funds and lack of transparency became the norm. The promised restorations never materialized, though that seemed to be the least surprising aspect of it all. The HOA continued its relentless pursuit of control, finding every opportunity to impose fines and restrictions on me and my mother. Their absurdity reached new heights as they nitpicked over trivial matters such as smoking in our own yard or parking our vehicles on the side of the road. It was as if they were desperately grasping at straws to exert their authority over our lives, regardless of how insignificant these issues truly were. The hypocrisy was staggering. While they were quick to impose penalties for the smallest infractions, they conveniently ignored any and all complaints anyone raised. When we asked the construction of public parking spaces to address the chronic parking issues, their responses were nothing but empty words. They blabbered excuses, evading any responsibility. So much for restoring the village. Months passed in a more or less boring fashion, until finally the HOA decided they were not being a-holy enough lately. What then happened was, a middle-aged balding man appeared at our doorstep claiming to be the self-proclaimed president of the HOA. His demeanor reeked of arrogance and entitlement as he demanded that we produce legal proof of our ownership of our property. The audacity of this man, with his questionable character and dubious authority, was simply astounding. Though our neighborhood had taken a turn for the worse, we had always maintained proper documentation to substantiate our ownership of both our properties as well as the adjacent jetty. We presented him with the full array of legal documents firmly asserting our rights. You could tell from the old man's face that he had not expected to be bested like this, and having come across people like these, I knew he was not gonna take this defeat quietly. Instead, he started talking about how much he respected people like us who still upheld the law, and offered us a place in the HOA, trying to make us join the HOA neighborhood. We obviously and respectfully declined. Though again, it seemed like this president was not used to being denied like this. He continued to talk about his forefathers or something the like. I honestly only remember it being extremely boring. When his speech ended, my mom dryly turned down his offer yet again before closing the door on his face. But experience told us that it was not the end. And surely, not 2 days later, we were facing the president of the Homeowner Association again, though today he seemed a lot less in awe of us law-abiding citizens, and instead he started accusing us of hoarding the river access property that the village could use. We calmly told him that we only owned a portion of it, the entirety of the river was free to be used, but that was not what he wanted to hear. Because then he started shaming my mother using words I don't want to ever repeat. What I do want to repeat though is the punch I landed on his wrinkled face and the satisfying crunch I heard against my knuckles. The president with his minions swore to make our lives a living hell, and I legit laughed at the moment because at this point maybe even hell was better than this place. Anyways, he went away cursing and me and my mom decided to go fish. It always helped us calm down after an awful day. We came back to trash littered in front of our property and went inside laughing our asses off. The HOA's pettiness continued to grow and grow, with random acts of vandalism and sometimes even screaming curses from across the road at us. It always made us chuckle because these people really thought that these things would be enough to annoy someone who had seen the fall of their birthplace. But we let them continue because they were nothing more than annoying pests to us at this point. However, it became a problem when both me and my mom had to go away. I had to go attend a friend's baby shower in the nearby village and my mom had to attend a funeral in another village. Pretty poetic if you think about it, but it posed a challenge for us because who knows what the HOA will do if we were not around. So we decided to be cautious and installed the locks my mother had saved and kept in pristine condition over the years. The old kind that worked better than what we had access to and was practically unbreakable. We even asked our neighbor to let 2 of his dogs, I don't know the breed but they were huge and pretty terrifying, be in our yard at night for added security. But despite everything, we both still came back to our property, clearly being trespassed by the HOA. Because the adjacent jetty was now fenced and locked away, no longer accessible to us. Our neighbor informed us that he tried to stop them, but of course he was a single person in front of 8 dumb and crazy people. I told him it was alright and I'll deal with the HOA on my own. However, my neighbor advised that I take this matter to the courts and sue the entirety of the HOA. I obviously didn't think he was serious because, court, really? In this unlawful place? As if. It was then that I heard the words that I still remember to this day. What money-hungry people hate the most are other money-hungry people. So yes, I did go to the court and did sue the HOA, and I did end up winning the lawsuit and getting $172,000. Totally crazy, right? I guess my neighbor was correct and his words were liquid gold. Because when it was revealed that the HOA was stealing and forging documents in the name of the government, they were essentially taking away the black money that should have been taken away by the government. So the officials whose pockets were being picked did what they had the power to do. They fined the HOA and the president to the hell and back. I had not even asked for $172,000, but I was still given that because, well, they couldn't keep that money, right? They just wanted to break the HOA's funds and drain their accounts so the HOA would not be able to operate anymore, and they accomplished exactly that. And I got a sweet fortune out of it, so who am I to complain? Added to people asking if I lived in El Salvador. No, I didn't, but my place could be called El Salvador's little brother. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm curious, what would you do if you lived next to an HOA neighborhood and the HOA crazy busybodies decided to build a fence on your property to essentially lock you out? I swear, these HOAs are getting more and more entitled. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you again tomorrow.